This is Luffy versus Kizaru. Strength or scenario one, my bad. There's two scenarios for this, alright? Two scenarios. Two scenarios for this one is pre-time skip, when they met at Sabodi, and then Egghead. These are basically self-explanatory. If you watch the anime, right, you'll know like what I'm saying um about these scenarios. You'll probably agree with what I say too. With a few, whatever, you might not agree exactly with something I say, but you're probably going to agree. If you're an anime head and you watch One Piece, you know, it, so scenario one, right? That's like Sabaody arc when they were trying to get away from Kizaru and they called Kuma over and everything. If Luffy was fighting Kizaru like head on there, like just with what the move set he had, which was like gear third, gear second, um, you know, no hockey really. And then Kizaru with his light dough fruit. So Kizaru is stronger than Luffy. He there was no supernova on that island that was gonna be able to stand on business against him. Not Kid, not Law, not Luffy. Like none of them. Like he made work of them. Like they were nothing. Um, and that's what admirals do. If you don't have certain abilities, speed is also Kizaru. He's light itself. Like I like to say, Kizaru is the fastest person in One Piece. He's the fastest. Nobody's faster than him. The only way you can like counteract his speed is with Conqueror's Hockey, and strong Conqueror's Hockey too, not weak shit. Durability is Kizaru. Now I would have gave it to Luffy, but I'm still like I don't know. I still think that Kizaru has better. You know, he could take a beating from that Luffy if he like let a few attacks hit him. You know, which he might do to play games, like because he plays games with people. He plays with his food a little bit. He'd like put up his guard and like let Luffy hit him with some Gatling, and then he'd just be like, okay, let me not play games, and then he'd like start spamming light beams and shit. You know, endurance is Kizaru. Um, and also it's just like he would just be so much more powerful than Luffy. Like at that point, like it was like that. Um, intelligence is also Kizaru. He's smart. He has to be, on his shit. He calls to, commands from above, and then like go about his mission, get it done. You know, idiots do follow orders too, but to do your job effectively, you have to be smart. And that's what he's not the most effective, but he does get his job done right. Experience is also Kizaru. He's obviously older than Luffy, and he's been doing his thing longer than Luffy's been doing his. So that's the experience. All of that goes to Kizaru. Now, close skills, I give it to Luffy though. Luffy will, use close range attacks more so than Kizaru will, and that is shown too. Kizaru likes to use kicks, but even when he uses those kicks, they're like more long range kicks. He shoots a light beam from his foot. You know, range skills, Kizaru, obviously. He shoots beams of light out, and they're devastating. They destroy shit. Um, Recoup is Kizaru. You saw what happened to him, right? When Apu did his little thing, um, he tried to like dismember his body, but then he's light itself, so he came back together again. Hacks or Luffy though, because Luffy, like I said, he has gear second and gear third. And he also the main character, right? Like he could probably maybe survive that situation, you know. But also like this is the main reason I give the hacks to Luffy because he does have Conqueror's Hockey and he did use it one time before Sabodi, one time. But he doesn't have mastery over it. He doesn't even know what the fuck it is. Environment is Luffy. Um, that's a pirate safe haven there on Sabaody and shit. So like Kizaru, Luffy, he could be like, I need help, which Luffy doesn't always do that shit. But if he wanted to, and like Zoro or somebody else could pop out, Kizaru has that too, but Luffy has that more. Even in that situation, he does. And then also Luffy, he's been to multiple islands. He just goes there and does it. Mostly Kizaru, right? He has his orders, right? So he has to go there upon, somebody giving him direction. You'll be going to this place because this pirate did this and this. Luffy's going to an island because, he needs to go there and explore it and see what's going on if he wants to, or he won't be there that long if you don't like that. Either way though, Kizaru wins that shit. Um, 3 points for Luffy and 8 points for Kizaru. So it's kind of a landslide. There's no way Luffy, wins that. Um, Now scenario two is different though. Much more close in this scenario. This was after Luffy fought Kaido and everything and became an Emperor of the Sea on Egghead. If you're watching the anime right now in stub, okay, because they don't have it out in dub yet. All right, because I'm watching it too. That Kizaru versus Luffy is a thing going around, and it's on the internet and everything. But true heads already knew about it, and I did too. They knew that it was coming and shit, and they were excited for it. And to see it animated now is amazing. So strength goes to Luffy. Um, Luffy had to stand on business against, like I said, Kaido, and Kaido is not losing to Kizaru in a one-on-one. Um, and then Kizaru is, he's pretty powerful, strong. He can stand on business against multiple, like I said, Supernova and shit before they had their move sets and shit. Now though, like if it came down to him fighting like Kid and Law, honestly, I don't know. I think they could possibly beat him. Like personally, I do. If they like figured him out and shit and could like somehow hold him down, um, they could probably figure some shit out for that. Um, without Luffy and shit. And then like Luffy versus Kid in Law, I know that's definitely Luffy wins that. Um, Luffy's winning that fight. Um, I'm just saying Luffy stands on business better. And speed goes to Kizaru though. Still, like I said, he's lighted. So durability goes to Luffy. You know, in Gear 5, he's still smiling and everything, like nothing's happening to him. He can take a beating, blunt force damage, and all that extra shit, right? We all know that about him. He's just way more durable after time skip. He has armament hockey, in the advanced forms of that as well. He'll be all right. Um, Endurance goes to Luffy as well. Like I said, he had to fight against a Kaido and shit. Now he wasn't in Gear 5 the whole time, but still, and if you watch the anime and read the manga and shit, right? Luffy's in Gear 4, then Gear 5 fighting against Kizaru. He ran up on Kizaru in base. He wasn't afraid. He's ready for that long fight. If he has to fight that long fight, Luffy can endure that and still come out on top. Intelligence is Kizaru, of course. Luffy's not the one to think things through necessarily. Like he can in a fight, because his life might be on the line. Then he has to think. But he ain't thinking too deeply about nothing. Kizaru, he could be thinking about other things. After this, I have to do this because I'm an admiral. I have to fucking do this and do that. You know, that's things that are on his mind. He is a thinker more so than Luffy is. And then experience also goes to Kizaru again. Like I said, he's just been doing his job longer than Luffy, so the experience goes to him. Close skills go to Luffy still. He has more moves. He has the Dawn moves, Dawn Gatling, and pistol, and like all that shit. You know, and like their range moves too, but like he can run up on you and he touches them too. Um, but Kizaru has the real range skills. Like he could shoot blasts like from outside of the island and get like he can even transport himself through light beam. You know, range moves. He don't have to be right up on you. He shoots light rays, and you know you get hit by him. uh, Recoup though goes to, you know, I gave it to Kizaru still. As Luffy, you know, he has Gear 5, right? He has to recover from Gear 5, right? It takes a lot longer for him to recover from Gear 5 than Luke. It takes Kizaru to recover from, you know, some damage. Um, Kizaru would recover from damage quicker than Luffy. Even still, but once Luffy has that shit mastered, he'll be alright. But hacks go to Luffy. Like I said, that's Gear 5 we're talking about, not just. And he has Gear 4 at this point. And he has Advanced Conqueror's Hockey, you know, Advanced Rio Emittance, Future Sight. His toolkit's a lot much bigger than Kizaru. Environment goes to Luffy still, too. You know, he does have the power of the Marines behind him, but then Luffy has the power of, you know, his alliance and, you know, people, you know, who, you know, look up to him, more people, and people who are, you know, truly ready to throw down their lives for Luffy if he had to. You know, being a pirate, he has been to multiple places and other things. You know, Kizaru has, but on orders, remember that. You know, 6-5 though. I give that to Luffy. You know, it's Luffy's win over Kizaru. You'll see that in the anime too. You know, that's what I saw in the manga, and then you'll see it in the anime too. That's a win for Luffy. Uh, you know, Luffy and Kizaru. You know, and when I have it ranked, you know, and Kizaru is not no slouch. Out of all the, you know, admirals that are currently in, he's the most powerful. You know, even more powerful than Fuji and Aramaki. You know, the OG admirals are a league above the other ones. Just they are. You know, if Luffy had to fight against, you know, Aokiji or Akahinu, you know, that would be even closer, but it would be very similar. Luffy would still have the, you know, he endures. He's just, you know, when he has something to fight for, he is strong. He stays on that business, and he does. You know, and in Akahina, you could say he's like that too, but man, you know, these admirals versus Luffy. Luffy's not no, you know, scrub no more. He's like that, y'all. You know, it's amazing to watch One Piece now and know that he's doing his thing. So basically, Luffy is better. Out of Kizaru and Luffy, that's what Green Angel says. Luffy is better. He had to train his ass off, go through all these fights after he got to the New World to be able to fight against Kizaru and be on par with him, or you know even be you know able to defeat him too. Um, yeah, you'll just have to watch those episodes too and know that they're gonna be great. Stay cool on the corner too.